Okay, good morning again, everybody, and welcome to the STC Workshop. My name is Carla Iorio. Thank you, Nicola, for the introduction. I am head of special airplanes and project sections dealing with military civil dual-use platforms that are actually the product lines, that is within the scope of this presentation. I am really glad to briefly open this presentation that will be done by my colleague Johan Nyberg and Stefan Warburg. And they will accompany you along the path of discovering more about this new, I would say, technical domain. And I'm glad to open it because for me this presentation is intended to create the proper bridge with the information that have been provided to you last year in May 2018. That was, I would say, the opening, the starting moment for us to enter into the interesting aspects of the new basic regulations and what was expected to happen, and how to treat and manage this new business entrance in the certification domain. And the reason of this bridge is because from May 2018 and May 2019 a lot has been done. And in fact, my colleague Johan and Stefan, they are not only, as introduced by Nicolas, large airplane PCM and CT Directorate avionics experts, but both of them, they are focals for PCM experts and for experts at CT Directorate, but also at agency level of a task force that has been created to bring forward all the aspects relevant to the preparation for the military civil certification domain. So they will detail information, as I said, on the progress status of the new basic regulations as relevant to the military applications. They will describe you what has happened in terms of EASA internal coordination on these platforms, and also illustrates to you what has been done as far as concern classified documents management and export control documents. Okay, so I welcome Johan and Stefan, and I thank you again for your attention.
Thank you, Carla. If you remember when we were here 1 year ago, we were still waiting for the basic regulation to enter into force. You see the red dot, that's 1 year ago. And as planned, that happened in the third quarter last year. And I will spend a few words to elaborate on a little bit on what has been done since then. What's happened? Ah, there we are. This is how the old basic regulation looked like. We had those elements covered there. And then the new basic regulation, named 2018/1139, added in some new elements: ground handling, the single European sky implementation, cybersecurity, etc. And this was done on the 11th of September 2018, more or less according to the schedule, and repealing the regulation 2016-2008. And from now we will refer to it as being the new basic regulation. As you see, it entered into force in 2018. During end of 2018, we started working on the rule making for implementing rules. This has continued during 2019, will continue during 2019, and the plan is to have the opinion out for implementing rules for it in 2020. That's next year. What's more interesting for you in this audience might be some changes that have been done related to your areas. The opt-in is one of them. We have the risk-based elements that are introduced in the regulation, with additional flexibility for general aviation that is provided. And we have the European Plan for Aviation Safety, which is formalized and proposed for adopted by the Management Board. And then we have what is part of our presentation today, the flexibility for member states to apply the regulation, of course, on a voluntary basis, to activities that normally are excluded in the scope of the basic regulation, meaning the state aircraft and military aircraft traffic management. And there's also this possibility for manufacturers of aircraft that are excluded from the scope, the Annex 1 aircraft, to make an opt-in to the new basic regulations. Okay, what is then the opt-in for the military aircraft? Well, it is the possibility for member states to decide to apply the basic regulation to their aircraft performing state operations, meaning military, police, coast guard, firefighting, search and rescue, etc. And they would normally be subject to national rules, but they can choose to opt them under our system. The main benefit for this would be that it would be mutual recognition of the certificates, and would then make it easier to move those kind of aircraft within European Union. They would enjoy some kind of international recognition of these certificates and increase their market value. The one important thing here is that this is a voluntary modular nature, and this decision to apply for the basic regulation and the extent to which it is applied remains in the hand of the member states. This means that they do not need to extend to the full EASA system, nor to the full range of state operation and the responsibility of the member states. 3 bullets on that one. A member state may decide to opt in for the police operations, but maybe not for search and rescue or for the Coast Guard. Equally, the member state can decide to opt in a certain category or type of aircraft. They can opt in their fixed-wing aircraft, but not the rotorcrafts. And finally, a member state may decide to opt in for one area of the EASA system and not for the others. For example, they can opt in for the airworthiness of the aircraft, but not for the operations. And I think that since the implementing rules are in development, I think this might be a topic that we come back to next year even. It's a lot of work to do there to finalize it. Some highlights on the opt-in. It's important to understand that within each area of the opt-in, it has to be complete. It's not possible to opt in for the initial awareness of the aircraft and exclude the awareness and maintenance part of the aircraft. This must be the complete package. It needs to, we have a need for the specific measures to address the risks created by the disconnect from total system approach. So when they opt in for one part and not the other, it somehow must be mitigated how this interface will work. Due to this modularity, each opt-in case will be different from the next, of course. It will be case by case. Everyone will have their unique solution or proposal. And the basic regulation establishes only one condition for the opt-in, which is that the provisions covered by the opt-in can be effectively applied. That can be, of course, different from case to case also. Otherwise, the formalities to implement the opt-in are quite simple. The member state needs to issue a decision, and from that date on, the opt-in applies immediately. However, then the member state notifies the decision to the Commission and the agency, which together then, with the relevant information, decide if the conditions for the opt-in are fulfilled, if it's effectively applied. And once the member states, once this decision is taken, we will notify the member state, and they might need to modify something, or might take the decision to revoke this previous decision. For DOAs, it's important to understand that they need to demonstrate that they can maintain an STC, for example, for the continued awareness also. When you make the STC on a state aircraft, and then you transfer it or a military aircraft, and you transfer to the operator, you need to make sure that even if the aircraft then will be operated on another register, that you still can keep your STC alive. We do have some experience on this already. I touched some of this last year. But of course, this opt-in gives us a wider scope. There are big antennas, there are radar jammers, governmental cabin configurations, surveillance radars, direction finders. The list can be endless of different kind of specific installations on those kind of aircraft, state aircraft, military aircraft. And they will always end up in specific discussions, as I said. We will issue crews that are not the regular crews, and we'll have more discussions on those kind of projects. Some of them which we are already exposed to, it's in principle the new basic regulation gives the mandate for this, but we have already been working on in quite a number of those kind of projects for many years. We can mention the Alenia C-27, the CASA 212, 235 and 295, which we all have been working with for a very long time. The A400M is maybe the most prominent example, where we have a civil type certificate on a military new developed aircraft. A330 MRTT is also one of those, which is a very extensive extensive STC to a baseline aircraft from Airbus. We have water bombers and so on. So we are somehow already used to work with this, but now the new basic regulation actually give the mandate for it. And what is important internally for us is that since the area is new and we need to still work on this, we have the rule-making groups working on it. So we have a quite high agency level coordination on these topics. You can mention we have the EASA military coordination mechanism with a senior advisor for these topics, which kind of help us keeping this on the coordinated level on the agency. We do participate to some NATO working groups, for example. And now we're talking internally, but of course also what is important to come up is that we need to communicate to you, the DOAs, on what's coming up and how we interpret these rules and so on. one aspect that came up here and has been emphasized is the export control documents. And we have experienced this in some projects where we have identified that we have EAR documents, and what we discovered is that we didn't have any procedures how to handle such documents, any firm procedures, agreed, endorsed procedures. So in cooperation with our legal department, it's an important player, and our military coordination mechanism, we introduced a task force in which Stefan and I were two of them, Carl one, and also one of our senior PCMs are part of it, to try to develop the procedures for this. Our goal is that we will cover both for the EAR and ITAR. And then the question is, what is then export control? The most known and prominent examples, I think, is the EAR from US. This stands for Export Administration Regulations, which are issued by the US Department of Commerce, and it's therefore dual use items. We have the ITAR, which is also quite common, International Traffic Arms Regulations, which are controlled by the US Department of State, and this is for military items more. But this is, in principle, it's nothing new. Already in the year of 1775, United States issued the first regulation for export control. That was even 1 year before they issued a Declaration of Independence. This was to prevent that military technology was sold to Great Britain by that time. So it's been there for some time in different ways. And it's also important to understand that this is, we talk about the EAR, we talk about ITAR, but it's actually a quite big agreement. There's something called the Wassenaar Agreement, which is signed by, I think it's 31 countries, the ones indicated in blue on this map. It was called signed in Wassenaar, which is a fancy small town outside Den Haag in Holland. And on the European side, we have covered this by the Council Regulation for 28 2019, if someone wants to look at that. With that, I think I will leave the floor to Stefan.
Thank you, Ian. So yes, we would like to expand a bit on the different aspects that we expect from you as applicant when you will submit certification data subject to EAR, and in the meantime to explain what we have done to make sure that your data will be protected. I would like to start with this, let's say, takeaway. Sharing of information, or sharing simply, is exporting. I want to put a bit emphasis on that because you have two forms of export. The first is the tangible one. You buy a product, you refurnish it, you install it, and you sell or you deliver something to a supplier or to end user. So this is the most obvious form of export. Then maybe the other one, the intangible one, is less obvious. Anytime you disclose an information to a recipient, you share the information, you export the information. So we will be more to support your certification. We may be in that case of configuration, knowing that through the intangible form, any information communicated also by WebEx, phone, all the things you can imagine, are subject to EAR or to ITAR regulation. The main risk within our framework of certification is to not control the dissemination of the information. So for sure, if I send some of the data you give to me to North Korea, I'm liable because I obviously violate the information or the exportation rules. However, we also need to guarantee that we don't disclose something by mistake or lack of rigor. So it's where we need to pay attention to make sure that all the stakeholders supporting the certification have the same level of understanding and same level of care about the information that we receive, that we exchange between us. We have added a note for sure, as told by Carla and Johan. Our primary concern are the civil military projects, products, dual use, but we also understand that through traditional civil products and civil certification, we are also exposed to ER. ITAR not, but ER yes. So we will have the same level of consideration for civil certification. Very first thing, so what we expect from you as applicant before to start any certification project. Some open points are definitely open doors, but I prefer to state than to forget something. So very first thing, we expect you to check if you have some material subject to ER ITAR. If you don't know, we will not know, and we may violate the rules. Another principle is please try to avoid or try to minimize the amount of sensitive information. If we have a document which is classified ITAR simply because we have 10 lines which are extremely critical and sensitive, and then the complete set of documents is classified ITAR, it does not make sense if it's not required for certification for sure. But if you can expurge the information from the document, then it's not classified, and we will all save time and effort to manage this kind of data. You need to check if EASA is required to obtain a license. So to do that, you have some recommendations on the US website, let's say. Public information is the way to do that. Specifically, for instance, for the ER, you have the depending of the product, the kind of technology, etc., etc., etc. You have the export control classification number, which depending of the nationality of the end user, the need or not for license. So you must ask your system suppliers what are the technology that you going to be subject to ER, what are the ECCN related to that technology, to check if we are allowed to access the information with or without license, and then for sure to obtain the license. So we have some cases for inertial reference system, for instance, where we have subject us EASA to be covered by license. Without that, we cannot process the document. We cannot perform the review, we cannot support you. Or if we do, we are liable, you are liable. So the best is to make sure that everything is properly managed from US administration perspective. When you will deliver the document, please properly identify the different items to make sure that we don't access to something where we are not allowed to, or at least to inform the team what are the sensitive information or not. Most of the time for ER, we are touching a basic level of classification. There is no big matter, but the best is to properly label on the document what is ECCN code. You can put a rest stamp or whatever. You have some consideration on the BIS as well. But when we access the information, we must know on top to what kind of information we access and if they are classified or not. We have put in place, so we have deployed CEPIAC. I'm sure that plenty of you are already using that to exchange information with EASA. So that will be the preferred mean or the only mean authorized to exchange data for a very good reason, because by mail, by external exchange platform or whatever, we don't guarantee we don't guarantee that nobody else will have access to that, and we can guarantee that the restriction of the information. Through CEPIAC, we can do it, we have access right, so we can ensure that only the restricted people and all the people to the project will have access to the information. On top, the CEPIAC servers are managed in Europe, in Germany, so we control also the location of the information. Last point, that then it will depend on the configuration of the kind of project you want to have with us. If you anticipate any need for EASA to share the information, for instance, to support a validation, I don't know, to Asia, to North Africa, or this kind of area where licenses are necessary, we will require you to anticipate that need and to make sure that the end user will have access to the license, and that we eventually will share the information with them. From a DOA perspective, so you need to integrate this civil-military strategy aspects and ITAR aspects within your DOA. So that's a bit a repetition of the previous point, but I want to highlight two things that civil-military strategy focal point in DOA have been appointed. So it's Hans Lundstrom, if I don't scratch his name, Hans Lundstrom, who will manage this activity. And then as for the previous, synergy within EASA between DOA and STC, here the same is reconducted with a synergy between DOA and the certification department to have synergy, so to not be inefficient, so to be efficient, and to make sure that we address the different matters related to the civil military certification in a common way within the agency. Regarding the export control aspects, I will say first that on top, I think the best is to apply the principle of the need-to-know principle. Make sure that only the access which needs to perform an activity, to review the document or whatever, have access. So you restrict the access to the data. Some key consideration. The very first item to check is the eligibility of the staff to access the data. It's not so obvious. For sure, we are, I guess, almost all Europeans, so we are not subject to hard rules from the US administration. However, you need to check the citizenship, and you may have some cases with dual citizenships, French Russian, French Iranian, I don't know. But in that case, that may be a matter to give the access of the staff or your staff to the data. Data transfer and IT structure, you need to guarantee that the IT infrastructure is robust enough to avoid the dissemination of the information. And you need to train the people to make sure that they properly apply the rules that you may have and that we have, definitely. What we have done and what we have achieved in the past month within the EASA, so there was a cross-agency effort, which includes various entities within the organization, so for sure the certification directorate, but definitely supported by the legal department, and on top, the senior military advisors, which provided support to the definition of the rules. We rely on the guidelines of the BIS from the US administration. What we have achieved, it's some guidance to manage the EER on a restricted framework, because we don't believe that we need directly us to export the information, to share the information. For that, again, we will rely on you. But at least we need to ensure that we, us, properly manage the information we receive. The ITAR is still on work, so we have started, but not yet achieve additional rules for consideration. And the response should be adequate to cover control documents from other country. Yes, that's also the case. So we need, yeah, also, yeah. We need to make sure that from one country to the other, there is no matter if, again, we exchange the information. So the next step is we are waiting for the nomination of the export control compliance officer, which takes the responsibility, ensure the consistency and the adequacy of the process across the agency. We are going to reinforce to complete the ECP and to gain the endorsement of the ECP, so the Export Compliance Program, and to roll out, again, within the agency, among the different departments and directions, directorate, the different set of rules and consideration. We have provided some useful links, so I don't know what is your level of awareness on such items, consideration, and concern. We have put some useful links. Then you can have a look and check if you are already subject to ER, if you don't know, and to go back to us if there is any question.
Thank you, Stefan.
Thank you, Stefan and Johan, and thank you for your attention. I think we have some time for a forum and answering to your question. I would invite Nicole, our senior military advisor. I saw he was in the audience, so he can join us as a panel of discussion. Thank you very much, everybody.
So thank you, Denis, for joining us. So we have a couple of questions through Slido, and we are going to be able to use the coming 10 minutes to answer some of those. One very interesting one is about the question from Mr. Savage, who said, there is no approved self-protection system as far as I know. How can a STC holder install this type of equipment according to CS25? So I think that Johan, first you are going to correct the assumption, and second answer the question.
Yes. Actually, we have 2 STCs that I'm aware of for self-protection system which we have approved at the EASA. But it's correct in that sense that we have no approved self-protection systems. Both STCs are approved with no credit for the effectiveness of the system. From the CS25 point of view, they are not active in that sense. But we have approved 2 of them, and both times I know that there have been a lot of discussions on how to show the compliance for this and how to introduce procedures and in AFM. So it's a delicate kind of question, because there are a couple of different kind of systems out on the market. Some uses flares, and of course live flares need to have some consideration from a civil point of view. So they have always, those 2 STCs caused a lot of discussions, but there are 2 of them at least I know.
If I may complete on this topic, there is a special condition which is available on the EASA website. So we have additional materials allowing the installation of such system within a CS25 aircraft.
Yeah, good point.
Thank you very much. Mr. Franz Redak has asked a second question about the installation of military or semi-military systems. The question is, are there any efforts in regards to the EU-wide operational approval of such systems? So I think, Denis, you're probably the best of us to answer such a question, sorry.
Okay, so good morning to everyone. Of course, you have to keep in mind, of course, and referring to the previous question when it comes to self-protection equipment, nothing is really there. But what we are working on is to take into consideration such kind of, I would like to say, business needs, and of course, when it comes to you, to certification issues. We are still in a transition phase, and not everything is done. We can say, a strategy in place that was mentioned this morning, and we are approaching stepwise progress. Of course, as a military advisor, and I'm supported by my colleagues Bernd from the German military, we can say, a more business approach to what are the needs of the military, and we try with our colleagues, which are of course specialists, very authority mindseted, we try to progress to stepwise approach. As it was mentioned that this self-protection is not yet approved by EASA, but I am personally fighting a lot that we can, in time, certify fully such kind of equipment. And I don't like to see words military or semi-military. It's just an equipment. As long as we continue to talk military and civil, we'll have difficulties to progress. There is not a civil system, there is not a military system, there is an EASA systems. EASA, it's of course at European level well understood and accepted. and the military, they will stepwise converge to these systems. The reference time, I would like to speak in decades. I don't speak in weeks or in months, it's in decades. And we progress stepwise to this convergence. Of course, in front of me, I have many people from industry, I can imagine. When it comes to military, as the military is not, of course, it's a strong family, but not in the sense when it comes to airworthiness and sovereignty. They are rather fragmented. And what is important, it's that we discuss, you guys discuss with EASA, this one point, but you need also to discuss with the military. As they are fragmented, different approach. They have to gain for their interest, and for various interests, sovereignty interest, yes, but also for business. They need also to converge between the military. And what I try to promote here in-house, it's not only a discussion with EASA and manufacturer, but EASA, manufacturer, and the user, which is the military. Of course, we have, I would like to say, a large number of projects in the pipe. Not everything will be feasible for tomorrow, but we are progressing, and it's despite they are fragmented, the military clearly understand the interest to work with the civil systems, mainly in terms of costs saving, according, often when they are aligned with the civil system.
Stéphane, we have a question for you, I think. The question is about the place of birth and nationalities of EASA staff. Is it necessary for the applicant to know that, or should we just keep it internal at EASA and give the assurance that we are dealing with that in a proper manner?
So this is exactly that. We keep the information internal. So when I was speaking about NIDL license, this is a license covering the EASA at organizational level. So here, there is no matter. You can ask for it if there is a need. Then what we do internally is to make sure that we don't have particular case that eventually may need to require an extension of the license or not. So we care about, internally, we care about the nationality and the eligibility of the staff. And if there is any matter, either we change the staff, or we will require, we will go back to the applicant and we ask for an extension. But this is our duty at organizational level to take care about that. We will not disclose the information to the applicant.
So it's not the responsibility of the applicant to know this kind of details.
Exactly. We keep it in the yes.
Okay, thank you.
Again, I can make a comment on this. ERA, ITA, and all this stuff, it's brand new for EASA, to be honest. We have put in place, we can say, initial guidance to deal with this. There is not a lot to improve, and we are working on this. We need to put in place probably a stronger structure and to make it, we can say, acceptable for us as soon as possible. One of a concern I share with my colleagues, because often again, don't split military world and civil world. EAR and ITAR equipment are also on civil aircraft. So that means you need to have a global approach to this issue. It's a constraint, that's true, it's a constraint, but it's by law, we have to apply this. And the team from Carla, they have put initial guidelines in place. Now we have to go probably in more granularity to be sure that it's according to the law, but also not constraining too much, because if we do stepwise on case by case, it's a bricolage, which is time consuming, and for you guys, it's money.